Hello. Let's talk about urban planning. Have you ever felt like your voice isn't being heard when it comes to your city's development? Well, probably we all have. And this is because traditional smart city initiatives often miss the mark by not including citizen input. So let's look at Decidim, a citizen participation platform for urban spaces, which aims to address this problem. I have invited Aline Suter to explain to us how Decidim promotes decentralization and collaboration to empower citizens in decision-making and social changes in the cities. Rodrigo Silva here. Let's talk about urban planning. Aline, welcome to our episode.
Thank you for the invitation.
So as I mentioned, Decidim was created as a tool to address the lack of citizen-centered practices in smart cities. And there is here, I guess, a potential to reclaim urban technology for collective benefit. So that's what prompted your research?
Yes, actually, in our case, we were really interested in how the Decidim platform is applied in Swiss cities. So that's where our research was focused on. And for those who are not familiar with the platform, Decidim was elaborated by basically grassroots practices from civil society in Spain after the 15M movement. And it was really a platform to enhance civil society voices in democratic processes. So not particularly in urban planning, but overall in democratic processes. And in our research, we were really interested in this question of how this Decidim platform, which really comes from the society, envisions kind of like a digital right to the city for everyone. So something that's often critiqued in smart city processes, if that actually changes this critique, because very often, scholars are rightly so addressing aspects of that smart governance or smart cities are creating new forms of power and control by state authorities, but also by technology companies. And through this Decidim platform, it approaches kind of like a new direction of working with open source platforms, working with a tool that was developed by citizens. So we're really interested in also this research gap of whether this tool actually resolves this relevant critique on smart cities and smart governance, or if these processes are ongoing.
So let us know the most important highlights or conclusions of your study.
So in our study, we looked at 3 different case studies in 2 Swiss German-speaking cities. And there, the Decidim platform was used for participatory budgeting, but only as a pilot project. So both cities have actually implemented this platform very newly. It was more kind of like an experimental setup. And we were interested in this question of whether this platform actually served as a space to discuss and negotiate urban space and also local claims on urban space. And it was quite interesting to see that actually we have seen sort of, at least in very hyper-local realities, we have seen shifting power dynamics. There was one case where a civil society organization actually organized a neighborhood festival through this platform. And it was really used as a counterpower and to claim urban space. And they have also addressed underlying urban issues such as financialization of land, disadvantaged neighborhoods, housing for profit. So on the platform to foster public support. And of course, something that's almost always the case with these platforms, if they're implemented correctly, is that it enhances aspects of transparency, the organization of information, and a better collection of citizen proposals. But what we have also seen is that the platform is, of course, still controlled and organized by city administrations. And therefore, kind of like this extent to which this platform enables a digital right to the city very much depends on those who are organizing these processes. So this was very interesting to see that it is actually less a question of which exact digital tool or platform to use, and more so how these processes are implemented. And we have also seen that sometimes governments see this platform as kind of like an automatic enabler of collaborative city making without really adjusting dominant distribution of power and agency. And this is one key takeaway for us, that of course this shift is necessary to actually widen the voices of the citizens in these processes.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned then discussing of several topics as budgeting and more transparent discussions, power shifting, but depends still on who organizes the process. I'm curious to know more about potentially policy implications or for individuals, city planners.
Yeah, I think we actually addressed a couple of quite real life situations that can be integrated to policy making when one integrates such a platform. So the first aspect is that there needs to be a local need for a new digital democratic instrument. If that's not pre-given, it is extremely difficult to integrate a new, very formal instrument. So that means that there needs to be some sort of accessibility to the tool, also familiarity with the tool. And what we have seen in one case is what's really beneficial if such a tool is implemented by a locally rooted actor. So, for example, a neighborhood association, so that we also have sort of this link to the physical space, to the neighborhood, to a sort of small scale networking in real life that can be then transformed or transferred to this digital tool. Another aspect that we have observed is that governments or government employees, so those who actually integrate and organize these processes, need to implement the scope of action, so which allows organized civil society and grassroots initiatives to appropriate digital infrastructure for their own purposes. So this is something crucial to actually enable this digital right to the city. And then the third point is also that local practices of hybrid communication and organizing need to be aligned with the structure of the platform. So there was one kind of like counter example in our case study where a neighborhood community actually then started talking on kind of like an everyday messenger app instead of on the Decidim platform. That just shows that the tool was not part of their everyday digital tools, which is extremely crucial if governments are interested in that people really use it kind of like on a daily basis.
The studies focus on Switzerland, and if I'm not mistaken, on early stages of Decidim implementation. And you indicate this in the study as being a research limitation. So what should future research address to follow up on this study?
Exactly. As you already mentioned, all three cases that we've looked at, they were all pilot processes. And both cities that we've looked at have now actually integrated the Decidim platform on their overall city level structure in the meantime. So they've started experimenting with this in 2019, and both cities have started to integrate the platform in 2021. So experiences with the platform are very novel still, both for the governments, but then also for researching these processes. So it will definitely be necessary to do similar explorations that we already did when these digital participatory governance practices have become more established in Switzerland, but then also in other European cities. And I mean, Switzerland is definitely not kind of like at the forefront of these processes, working with digital tools in urban governance. But I think it's an interesting case study, also thinking about the democratic processes that we have in Switzerland, and thinking from this angle, I think, could also enhance research on Decidim, the platform itself, but then also on the question of how do we actually discuss questions of claims to urban space, how we use urban space, how citizens can be part of urban planning processes in our future cities.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Because both here and in the article, you are very adamant about guaranteeing the right to the city. Even though an important step was made here, this right to the city is still to be claimed. So can you elaborate on that? And also share with us your own personal reflections of this study, like what struck you the most?
Exactly. So this question of how do we actually implement the digital right to the city was, of course, also from kind of like a theoretical standpoint. This was our kind of like analytical method of really study these case studies and think about how we could actually enhance the use of such platforms in urban governance processes. And I think what was really interesting to me in our study was actually the vast differences between these case studies in how they envision a right to the city, even though they all use the same tool and the same process. So we have seen everything from a grassroots appropriation of the platform up until to a very formalized process where, as I already mentioned before, the community then started talking to each other on an everyday messenger app. So this vast variety of cases within kind of like the same tool, the same application was also surprising, but quite an interesting standpoint, I think, to do further research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If as challenging as it might be, if you could sum up this conversation in 1 or 2 sentences, or even perfect in a PowerPoint slide presentation title, what would it be?
I think digital platforms such as Decidim cannot resolve entrenched inequalities in today's cities. So thinking about questions of financialization of land, disadvantaged neighborhood, also the absence of voting rights for certain communities. And this also means that tackling these urban inequalities only through smart city strategies is not enough. We need hybrid participation strategies as well as political means. And a platform alone, even if it's a platform such as Decidim, which envisions this right to the city, we need to shift pre-existing power dynamics in urban planning.
Great closing. Aline, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This podcast is powered by Cogitatu Press. You can listen to this episode on the Let's Talk About Urban Planning website, on Cogitatu Press YouTube channel, and whatever you get your podcast.